Good evening, students. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. In the midterm exam, it will cover module 1 to module 6. Actually, the official announcement will be given to you all tonight because today evening only I received the official confirmation about the exam pattern, all these things. So after this class, you all will receive one announcement regarding the details related to the midterm exam. Okay. So now, without further delay, let us no, 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 no. Don't attend any quizzes. See, there are 4 activities. Only discussion one, discussion board one, assignment two, discussion board two. These 4 activities only. Remaining all not mandatory. If you receive any automated announcements, please ignore. I will give whichever activity is released to you all. That will be followed by the announcement I will give. Okay. Okay, good. So now we're going to start with the 6th module, where we are going to discuss a very important topics related to the denial of service attacks. Denial of service attacks. So here we will see various concepts and mechanisms that are related to the denial of service attacks. So these are the topics that we are going to cover today. See, if you all remember, so far we learned the attacks that are related to the stealing of information, destroying the data, or installing a malware, or gaining unauthorized access. So instead of stealing information, the attacker simply wants to make a service unavailable, and that is called the denial of service attack. So a denial of service attack is an attack that attempts to make a computer system, network, or even the online service unavailable to the genuine users by exhausting or blocking the resources. So the main goal of the denial of service attack is to compromise the availability of component the availability component of the CIA Triad. So we know what is the relationship that is with the CIA Triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So the various types of DOS is going to target the availability. Unlike the cyber attacks, many DOS attacks usually they do not steal or modify the data. Instead, they prevent the genuine users from accessing the service. So a critical resource is anything required for the system to operate. Either it may be a CPU, GPU, RAM, network bandwidth, the disk space, database connection, web server processors. So when these resources are exhausted, the service can no longer respond to the legitimate users. So a denial of service attack will aim to disrupt the availability of a system or the service by exhausting the critical resources like CPU, memory, network, bandwidth, or even the server connections. So rather than stealing or modifying the data, a DOS attack overwhelm the target with excessive request. So it will be preventing the legitimate users from accessing the service. Effective defenses should include traffic filtering, then rate limiting, then firewalls, intrusion prevention systems, and the continuous network monitoring. So with all this, it will help us to detect and mitigate the abnormal traffic. See, the DOS attack usually comes from one attacking system, but whereas we have another category that is distributed denial of service, DDoS. This one is the most common and dangerous cyber attack that is used against the governments, banks, cloud services, and even the large organizations. So, a distributed denial of service attack, which is like an attack in which the multiple compromised computers or the internet connected devices simultaneously flood a target with enormous amount of traffic, making the service unavailable to the legitimate users. So here DDoS, a distributed denial of service attack, will extend the concept of a traditional DOS attack by using thousands of every million or even millions of compromised service devices. So often it organized into a botnet to have a target with enormous volume of traffic. So the modern DDoS will have the attacks frequently that will exploit the insecure IoT devices, and it can generate the traffic that is measured in the hundreds of gigabits or even the terabytes per second. So making them one of the most significant threat to the availability of internet services. So effective defense will require layered protection, including traffic filtering, cloud-based DDoS mitigation, load balancing, and the continuous network monitoring. See, according to the NIST SP 861, the Computer Security Incident Handling Guide, it defines a denial of service attack is an action that prevent or impair the unauthorized use of networks, systems, or the applications by exhausting the resources like CPU, memory, bandwidth, and even the disk space also. So a DOS attack is an attack that make a computer system or online service unavailable by consuming all of its important resources so the legitimate users cannot use that. So the attackers do not necessarily steal the data. Instead, the attacker prevent the normal user from accessing the service. So what does authorized use, which means, see, it refers to the legitimate users or a customer or an employee or a student or administrator who have the permission to use the service. So a DOS attack will prevent these legitimate users from accessing the system. So according to NIST SP 861, a denial of service attack is an attack on the availability of networks, systems, or applications by exhausting the critical computing resources like CPU, memory, network bandwidth, or even the disk space rather than compromising the confidentiality or integrity. So the objective is to prevent authorized users from accessing the service. So the authorizations will reduce the impact of DOS attacks through the resource management, traffic filtering, rate limiting, the intrusion prevention, and the continuous network monitoring. Then the net it is having three categories according to the denial of service attacks. There are three major categories of resources that attackers commonly target. Number one, network bandwidth. Number two, system resources. Number three, the application resources. So suppose, for example, if some attacker is targeting our university system. So network attack means the student cannot connect to the portal or the faculty may not be able to access the university website. Likewise, and system attack, which means the server crashes because the CPU usage reached 100%. And application attack, which means the registration system will become slow because the attackers continuously submit valid registration searches. Likewise, so the main thing is that here a denial of service attack can target in these three different types of resources depending on the attacker objective. So network bandwidth attack will be like handling the internet connections with excessive traffic. The system resource attack will overload the operating system resources like CPU and memory using specifically developed or crafted packets. And the application resource attack will exhaust the application specific resources by sending large number of genuine content but computationally expensive requests. So when we understand these categories, it will help any organization to implement the appropriate defense mechanism like traffic filtering, operating system security, then web application protection. Likewise, then the classic DOS attack. See, a flooding ping attack, which is a denial of service attack in which an attacker will send a very large number of ICMP echo requests that we call it as ping, and these packets will be overloaded to a targeted network connection or even to the system resources. So the main goal here is to consume the targets available bandwidth and their processing resources also. So first of all, understand what is the keyword ping here, PING. It is a network utility that is going to be used to check whether another computer or the device is reachable over the network or not. So it works using the ICMP mechanism, Internet Control Message Protocol. In the next slide, we will see more details about that. So normally, one computer will send ping request, the destination will reply, ping reply. So this helps us to determine is the system is reachable, how long does the communication took, likewise. But the goal of the attack is to overload the capacity of the network connection to the target organization. So that our attacker wants to consume all the available network bandwidth. If the attacker has access to a higher capacity network connection, they can generate more traffic than the target that can handle. Like for example, attacker is having 10 Gbps connection. The target is having only 100 Mbps. Now the attacker can easily overload the smaller connection. So that is why a flooding ping attack, which is a classic denial of service attack that overwhelm a target's network connection by sending an excessive number of ICMP echo requests packets. So the objective here is to exhaust the available network bandwidth, causing legitimate users to experience the slow performance or complete service disruption. While the attack source is often identifiable through the source IP address, where the attackers may use IP spoofing, um, to conceal their identity. The organizations they defend against these attacks using the firewalls, rate limiting, intrusion prevention system, and even the continuous network monitoring mechanisms and all. So then, if you see the Internet Control Message Protocol, It is a network layer protocol that is used by the computers, routers, and even other network devices to exchange the control information, report the errors, and test the network connectivity. So unlike the HTTP or FTP, the ICMP does not transfer the user data. Instead, it helps the devices to communicate about the status of the network. So ICMP is going to be the part of the Internet Protocol Suite. So imagine you are sending a packet to another computer. So the question may rise whether the destination is reachable, whether the router is working or not, whether the destination is unavailable or available, whether the network is congested or it is a good way. So instead of remaining silent, network device use the ICMP to report these all conditions. So here if you see the Internet Control Message Protocol ICMP, which is a core internet layer protocol, and it is used for error reporting, and it is used for network diagnosis, and it is used for connecting the connectivity testing. So the widely used ping command will reply and rely on ICMP echo request and echo reply message to verify whether a host is reachable or not. While the ICMP will play a vital role in network management and troubleshooting, the attackers can misuse it in ping flooding the attacks and network reconnaissance, which will make the traffic filtering and monitoring important components of the network security. Now, the source address spoofing. Source address spoofing. See, however, the attackers usually do not want to reveal their real identity. To hide themselves, they use a technique called source address spoofing. In other way, we can also call it as IP spoofing. So these techniques will make it much more difficult to identify where the attack actually originated. See, the source address spoofing is a technique of forging, faking the source IP address in a network packet so that the packet appears to come from another device instead of the real sender. So instead of using the attacker real IP address, the attacker insert a fake IP address into the packet. So in this, the raw socket is going to play a very important role. Here, the raw socket is a programming interface that allow the applications to create and to send the custom network packets, including manually specifying fields like source IP address. So normally, the operating system automatically insert the correct source IP address with the raw socket. So the attacker, it's okay, no problem. So the attacker can manually replace it with a fake address. So the source address spoofing is a technique in which the attackers will force the source IP address of the network packets to conceal their identity and make attacks more difficult to trace. So it is commonly used in DOS and even in DDoS attacks also, where the large volume of spoofed packet overload a target resource. One consequence is backscatter traffic, in which the victims send the response to a spoofed address rather than to the real attacker. So to defend against this type of spoofing, the organizations and internet service providers, they implement the ingress and egress filtering, anti-spoofing rules, traffic analysis, and the backscatter monitoring. And then the backscatter traffic. See, this is one of the important topics and consequences of IP spoofing, which is the backscatter traffic. So let us understand what backscatter traffic is and how cybersecurity researchers are using it to study the internet attacks. See, mainly the backscatter traffic is the response, the traffic generated when a victim system reply to a packet that contain spoofed source IP address. So since the attacker used a fake source IP address, the victim unknowingly send its reply to the fake or innocent IP address instead of the real attacker. Let me define this simply for you. So think of something sending a fake letter using your home address at the as the written address. So the receiver will reply, but the reply arrives at your home even though you never sent the original letter. So that unexpected reply is similar to the backscatter traffic. So here if you see the backscatter traffic, which is the response traffic generated when victim rely to spoof the source IP address that is used in the network attack. Security researchers include the projects that monitor unused IP address blocks. So which collect these traffic to study the type, scale, and frequency of internet attacks. So although the backscatter does not directly identify the attacker, it provide the valuable threat intelligence that help the organizations to understand attack trends and important defensive strategies. So then we have SYN spoofing. See, just now we learned about ping flooding attacks and source address spoofing, right? See, the SYN spoofing, which is also known as a SYN flood attack, and unlike the ping flood, this attack does not primarily consume the network bandwidth. Instead, it attacks the server's operating system resources, specifically its ability to manage the new network connections. So the SYN spoofing is a denial of service attack in which an attacker will send a large number of TCP SYN packets using spoofed IP addresses. So it will cause the server to allocate the resources for incomplete connections until it can no longer accept the new legitimate connections. See, what is going to happen during this SYN spoofing attack? The attacker will send thousands of SYN packets but never complete the handshake. So these incomplete connections are called half-open TCP connections. So every server maintain a table of active connection requests. So thousands of incomplete connections fill the table. So there is no space remain for the genuine users. So what would be happen now? The genuine user are denied access to the server. So that is why the SYN spoofing, or you can call it as SYN flood, which is a classic denial of service attack that exploit the TCP three-way handshake by sending large number of spoofed um, SYN packets without completing the connection. So this creates the half-open connection that consume the server's TCP connection table and operating system resources, and also it will prevent the genuine users from establishing the new connection. So because its target is the system resources rather than the network bandwidth. So here the SYN flood can be highly effective even with relative low traffic volume. So the common defenses include the SYN cookies, ingress filtering, firewalls, intrusion prevention system, and the connection timeouts. So now let us see with an example here. It is a very interesting example we have now. Yes. So in this figure, if you see the left hand side, the normal TCP three-way handshake is there. This one, okay. Then on the right hand side, the SYN spoofing, that is this one. This case is there, okay. So by comparing these two diagrams, we can clearly understand how the attack exploit the TCP. So let us see first the normal three-way handshake. I mean the figure that is on your left hand side. So here the client wants to establish a connection. So it send a packet called SYN with the sequence number X. The figure shows also the send SYN sequence of X. This is the case. It is sending, and when think of it saying like, hello server, I want to connect with you. So the server receives the SYN packet. It received. Okay, then it reply. Then it reply the SYN acknowledgement. So now you may think, why here acknowledgement equals X plus 1? Because the server is acknowledging the receipt of the client's SYN. So the next step, the client send the acknowledgement saying that ACK equals Y plus 1. Now both sides are agreed, the TCP connection is established. The client message, server received the request, then replied the acknowledgement, then client acknowledged the connection. So the connection is established between the client and the server. Okay, now on other hand, we have this case. What is that? The spoofing, right? So here the thing is that the spoofed client is there, actual client is there, as well as the spoofed client is there. So the attacker send many SYNs, the server reply the SYN along with the acknowledgement. So no acknowledgement will arrive in the SYN's flood attacker for the normal connection. Then half open connections will be there, so the resource will remain occupied, so that the genuine user will be denied with the access. Let me take one real life example for this. See, imagine there is a hotel. A customer calls, I would like to reserve a room. The receptionist reserve the room, but the customer never arrives. If 10 customers do that, it's manageable. If 100,000 fake customers reserve the rooms and never check in, and all the rooms will become occupied on paper, but the real customers are told, sorry, the no rooms are available. So this is exactly what happened during the SYN flood attack also. So because each SYN packet consumes server resources while requesting or requiring very little attacker bandwidth, the SYN flood attacks are highly efficient, and they are commonly mitigated using the SYN cookies, connection timeouts, rate limiting, and the anti-spoofing mechanisms. And then the flooding attacks. See, now let us look at the broader category that is called flooding attacks. So a flooding attack is one of the most common method that is used to launch the DOS and DDoS attacks. Because here the basic idea is very simple. Send an enormous amount of network traffic so that the legitimate user cannot access the server. So a flooding attack is a denial of service attack in which an attacker overwhelms a target by sending an excessive volume of network packets, so exhausting network or the system resources and preventing the legitimate users from accessing the service. So the attack does not necessarily exploit a software vulnerability. Instead, it overwhelms the target with too much traffic. So the flooding attacks are classified based on the network protocol that is used, based on the network protocol that is used. So different flooding attacks use different network protocols. Some common ways, examples, if you see the ICMP, TCP, UDP, HTTP, DNS. So in ICMP, they use a ping flood, and in UDP, they use UDP flood. Likewise, so the main objective of flooding attack is the attacker may attempt to exhaust the bandwidth of the network link connecting the server to the internet, and sometimes the network connection is large enough but the server itself cannot process all incoming requests. So the attacker will overload the CPU, memory, connection table, and the web server process. Likewise, so here the server can process, like for example, 110,000 requests per second. Now the attacker send 500,000 requests per second. So then what will happen? The server will become overloaded. The server will become overloaded. So here, the flooding attacks are a class of denial of service attacks that overwhelm a target by generating excessive network traffic using the protocols like ICMP, TCP, UDP, HTTP, or even the DNS. So their objective is either to saturate the network bandwidth, leading the server, or to exhaust the server processing resources, so which will be preventing the legitimate users from accessing the service. So a network congestion increase, the router will begin dropping the packets, causing valid user requests to be lost alongside the malicious traffic. Effective defense will include traffic filtering, rate limiting, load balancing, web application firewalls, and even the cloud-based DDoS mitigation and the continuous monitoring. So now let us see the types of flooding attacks. See, the flooding attacks overload a network or the server by sending an enormous amount of traffic. So here if you see, even though they use different protocols, they all have the same objective. What is that? To deny the service to the genuine user by exhausting the network or by consuming the system resources. So in each case, in ICMP flood, it will do a different task. In UDP flood, it will do a different task. In TCP SYN flood, it also do the a different task. But their motive is same. In different patterns, they work. Like for the flooding attack can use these all different network protocols to achieve the same goal, for that is of denying the service. So the ICMP flood will overload the network with ping request, whereas the UDP flood will send large number of packets to the random ports, then forcing the operating system to process unnecessary traffic. Whereas the TCP SYN flood, which will overload the server with excessive connection requests, which exhausting the connection management resources. Even though the attack methods will differ, but all these three will target the availability of network services, and they are going to be the mitigated through the techniques like firewalls, rate limiting, intrusion prevention system, the SYN cookies, and the continuous traffic monitoring, like many things. Then UDP packet. So when you want to understand how the UDP flood works, let us get introduced with what is the UDP packet. So user datagram protocol, in short form we call it as UDP, and this is a transport layer protocol in the TCP IP suite that allow the applications to send the messages quickly without establishing a connection before the communication. So unlike the TCP, the UDP is designed for speed, low overhead, fast data transmission. It sacrifices the reliability of speed. Like for example, we have port 53 for DNS and port 67 or 68 for DHCP, 123 for NTP, then 161 for SMP. So the attacker can also send packets to the random port numbers. See, sending packet to the random port will increase the amount of processing the operating system must perform, because it has to repeatedly determine whether any service is listening or not, listening or not. So the user datagram protocol, which is a connectionless transport layer protocol that enable the application to send the messages quickly without establishing a connection. So during a UDP flood attack, the attackers transmit massive number of UDP packets to open or random the ports. So even when no application is listening on a destination port, the operating system must still process each packet and often generate an ICMP, destination unreachable response. So this unnecessary processing consume the CPU, memory, and network resources, eventually degrading or denying the service to legitimate the users. So effective defenses include the firewalls, rate limiting, intrusion prevention system, the traffic filtering, and even the cloud-based DDoS mitigation. So let us take 5 minutes break. The class will continue from 8:45 p.m. Okay. After 5 minutes, we will continue the session. Take 5 minutes break. What about now? Am I audible now? Thank you. So far we have studied the denial of service attacks, where a single attacker will send excessive traffic to overload the server. Now let us look at much more the dangerous attack, that is distributed denial of service attack. So instead of using one computer, here the attacker will use the thousands of even millions of computers simultaneously, which makes the attack much more powerful and much difficult to stop. So a distributed denial of service attack is an attack in which the multiple compromised computers simultaneously send the massive amount of traffic to a target, overloading its resources and preventing the legitimate users from accessing the service. So unlike the DOS attack, the attack traffic comes from many different computers, but not just from one computer. So, a distributed denial of service attack is a very powerful form of DOS attack in which the attacker will control a botnet that is compromised with the computers, which is known as the zombies, to generate massive amount of malicious traffic against the target, because the attack originates from many distributed systems. So the DDoS attack will produce much higher traffic volume than the traditional DOS attacks, and they are significantly more difficult to detect and mitigate. So the attackers often they use the botnets to launch ICMP, UDP, and the TCP SYN flooding. So the attacks simultaneously making cloud-based DDoS protection, the traffic filtering, load balancing, and the continuous monitoring is going to be the essential defense mechanism systems. So here the attacker certainly cannot send the commands to every zombie individually. In this picture, you can see how the network is going to be established. So the attacker certainly cannot send each and every system individually a command. Instead, the attacker use a control hierarchy, making the botnet management much more efficient. So a botnet, which is the control hierarchy, that is a layered command and control structure in which the attacker controls a small number of handler systems, and each handler will control many compromised computers. They will be like agents and zombies. So instead of controlling every bot computer directly, the attacker only communicate with a few handlers. The handler then distribute the command to all the zombies under their control. So there are three important components of this process. One is the attacker. The attacker is the person who create the botnet, who control the handler, who decide when to launch the attack. So the attacker send only one command, whereas the handler is a command and control server that receive the instructions from the attacker and forward them to many zombie computers. So you can think that like the handler as a manager. Instead of the attacker managing every zombie, the handler will manage the group of zombies. And then the third one is the agent. So an agent or the zombie, which is a compromised computer that receive the commands from a handler and perform the requested attacks on the target. So the automated tool search for and compromise the suitable zombie systems. And after the infection, the new zombie automatically reports to the handler. No human interaction is required in this type of cases. Every newly infected computer will be strengthened the botnet. So like for example, there is a university web page, or like you are all accessing the banner system in our university portal. So if it is the target by the botnet, then the attacker will send one command to the two handlers. Each handler will instruct thousands of infected student and home computers to flood the university server likewise. So the modern botnets will have evolved. The botnets have evolved beyond simple handler-based architecture, while early tools like Tribe Flood Network (TFN) that is used a centralized handler. Many contemporary botnet employ peer-to-peer or decentralized command and control mechanisms to improve the resilience against the takedowns. So regardless of the architecture, the fundamental concept remains the same. Compromised device will receive the commands from a controlled infrastructure, and they are going to coordinate the large scale attacks. So detecting and distributing the CNC communications. Therefore, it is one of the most effective strategies for limiting the botnet activities. Now, let us see some examples of DDoS attacks. See, first one is Tribe Flood Network, TFN. So this is a tool that played an important role in the history of cyber attack because it demonstrated how a single attacker could coordinate various and thousands of compromised computers to launch the DDoS attacks in a large scale. So it was developed in the 1990s, and the tool was created by a hacker using the name alias Mixter. It became one of the earliest publicly known DDoS attack framework. So these systems were popular Unix-based servers during the 1990s. Later, the TFN was improved and it was rewritten as TFN2K. So here in full form, if you say Tribe Flood Network 2000. So the newer version supported multiple operating systems. So the TFN2K could run on Unix, Solaris, Windows NT. So the malware exploited vulnerabilities in these operating systems to compromise the system and to recruit them into a botnet. So agents, like the agent was like a Trojan program that copied to zombie systems. So the attacker first infect a computer using a Trojan horse. The Trojan secretly install. Now the computer becomes a zombie or a bot which is ready to receive the commands and all. See, instead of sending all attack traffic directly, the attacker abuse other systems to amplify the amount of traffic reaching the victim. So a relatively small request can trigger a much larger volume of response traffic directed at the victim. So this greatly will increase the attack effectiveness, and also it will be using fewer attacker resources. So that is why the Tribe Flood Network, TFN and TFN2K, they both demonstrated how a single attacker could coordinate thousands of Trojan infection computers through a two-layer command hierarchy to launch the large-scale distributed denial of service attacks by combining multiple flooding techniques and automated botnet control. These tools highlighted the importance of proactive endpoint security, timely patch management, and the strong system, the hardening to prevent the computers from becoming unwilling of participants in the DDoS attacks and all. So the application based the bandwidth attacks. See, so far we have learned the network layer flooding attacks like ICMP flood, UDP flood, then TCP sync flood, DDoS attack flood, and all right. So instead of flooding the network, the attacker target the application itself by forcing it to perform expensive operation. So an application-based bandwidth attack is a denial of service attack that overwhelm an application by sending the legitimate locking request that require the significant processing resources that will be reducing or preventing the service for the legitimate users. So unlike the ICMP or UDP floods, these attacks will use the valid application request, and these requests themselves are legal, but there are too many of them. There are too many of them. So application based bandwidth attacks, they will target the application layer rather than the network or operating system. So instead of sending malware packets, the attacker will generate large number of genuine looking requests that force the application to perform resource intensive operation, so such as like database search, report generation, or session creation. So the common protocols exploited include HTTP for web applications and SIP for voice over systems, because these requests closely resemble the normal user activity. They are difficult to detect using the traditional network security devices. So effective defenses will include the web application firewall, the rate limiting, the behavioral analysis, captchas, load balancing, and the continuous application monitoring process. In that, first we have the SIP flood attack. So a SIP flood attack is an application layer DDoS or DOS attack in which the attacker will send a very large number of SIP invite requests to overload the VoIP server and exhaust its processing, memory, bandwidth, and even the session management resources and all. So here, importantly, a SIP flood attack is an application layer denial of service or DDoS attack that overload the voice over internet protocol server by sending a massive number of SIP invite requests. So because each invite request triggers expensive operation like authentication, user lookup, session creation, and resource allocation, so the attackers can quickly exhaust the server's CPU, memory, session management capacity, and the network bandwidth. So the SIP flood will attack. that may originate from spoofed IP address or even from the botnets, so which will make them difficult to detect and mitigate. So even effective defenses include session border controllers, SIP aware firewalls, rate limiting, IDS, IPS, traffic filtering, and even the continuous VoIP monitoring also. So by having a layered defense like session border control on all these mechanisms, we can have a countermeasure. So this is how it works in the SIP flooding. Now let us see the HTTP based attacks. So here two major HTTP based attacks are there. One is HTTP flood and another one is Slowloris attack. So both they target the web service, but they work in a different way. So if you remember HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, which is an application layer request response protocol that is used for communication between the web browser and the web server. Whereas the HTTP flood attack, which is an application layer attack in which the attackers send an enormous number of valid HTTP requests to overload the web server. Then the slow Loris attack. So this attack is an application layer attack that keeps many HTTP connections open by sending incomplete HTTP requests very slowly, preventing the web server from accepting from new connections. So please remember, in HTTP flood overload a server with massive number of valid HTTP requests, exhausting CPU, memory, and database resources. In contrast, the slow Loris will send incomplete HTTP requests very slowly, keeping connections open and monopolizing the server's available connection slots without generating high traffic volumes. So while the HTTP flood attacks rely on processing the overload, so the Slowloris attack exploit the connection management. Effective defenses will include the web application firewalls, rate limiting, the connection timeouts, the reverse proxies, the load balancing, content delivery networks, and the cloud-based DDoS protection and all. See, the major difference between these two, for example, the traffic volume in HTTP flood will be very high, but in slow Loris it is very low. And the request type in HTTP flood is complete HTTP request, but in slow Loris it is incomplete HTTP request. And the usually it uses the botnet. That means the HTTP flood will use the HTTP botnet, and the slow Loris often it won't use. And the main target in HTTP flood is CPU, memory, database, whereas in the Slowlor is the connection capacity or the threads. So this is the major difference between these two. And importantly, we need to make sure the countermeasures also. Together, these attacks will demonstrate why the modern web security requires intelligent application layer defense like web application firewall, behavioral analysis, reverse proxies, connection management, and the cloud-based DDoS protection, all these things and all. Then the reflection attacks. So a reflection attack is a DOS or DDoS attack in which an attacker will send the request to a third-party server using the victim's spoofed IP address, causing the reflector to send the responses to the victim instead of the attacker. So the attacker hide behind another server, like let me show you the picture. So the innocent server unknowingly attack the victim. See, a reflection attack is a DOS or DDoS attack. Any of this category it will be. And this attack in which an attacker will send the request to the genuine third-party server, it behave like a reflector. Using the victim's spoofing address, the reflectors unknowingly send their response to the victim, overload its network or the system resources while concealing the attacker's identity, while hiding the attacker's identity. So because the attack relies on the source address spoofing, the most effective defense is anti-spoofing, ingress or egress filtering, combined with firewalls, the intrusion prevention systems, the rate limiting and DOS protection services and all. So the main thing is that the reflection attacks are especially dangerous when combined with amplification attacks. Next, we will see where a small spoofed request generate with a much larger response from the reflector. For example, some DNS or NTP requires. This allow the attacks to produce very large amount of traffic while using relatively little bandwidth themselves. As a result, the source address validation by internet service providers and organizations in one of the most important internet-wide defense against reflection-based DDoS attacks and all. Then the amplification attack. Let me show you the diagram. Yes. See, an amplification attack is a advanced form of reflection attack. So in this, the attacker will send the request with the victim's spoofed IP address to intermediary systems. Then they generate the multiple or much larger response than the original request. Historically, attacks such as like the Smurf attack that is used ICMP echo request that will be sent to the network broadcast address, and it will be causing every host on that network to reply to the victim. So while the Fraggle attack that will be applied the same concept using the UDP echo service, and these attacks greatly increase the attack traffic while requiring minimal attacker bandwidth. So effective defense include blocking source IP, spoofing, disabling directed broadcast, disabling unnecessary UDP services. So the firewalls and DDoS will mitigate the solutions. Then we have the DNS amplification attack. See, a DNS amplification attack is a very powerful reflection and amplification DDoS attack that exploit the legitimate DNS server to generate a large amount of traffic towards a victim. So by sending small DNS queries with the victim's spoofed IP address, the attackers cause the DNS server to return much larger responses directly to the victim. So this enables the attackers to produce massive traffic while using a very little of their own bandwidth. So the most effective defenses include anti-spoofing, DNS response rate limiting, secure DNS server configuration, firewalls, intrusion, detection, prevention systems, and the cloud-based DDoS mitigation services and all. So then there are various lines of defense against the DDoS attacks. See, the distributed denial of service attacks cannot be completely prevented because the high traffic volumes may be genuine during flash crowds, breaking news, or even the major online events. So therefore, the organizations they adapt a layered defense strategy consisting of attack prevention and uh, before an attack. So the attack detection and filtering during the attack, and attack source traceback and identification during and after the attack, and attack reaction after the incident to restore the services and strengthen the future defenses. So likewise, the multi-layered approach will help to maintain the service availability while minimizing the impact of increasingly sophisticated DDoS attacks. See, mainly the modern organizations, they increasingly rely on the cloud-based DDoS protection platforms, content delivery networks, web application firewalls, and even the security operation centers. Why? To implement all these four defense layers, because it is often impossible to eliminate the DDoS attack entirely. The primary objective is resilience, maintaining service availability, detecting attack quickly, minimizing the disruption, and continue the improve of defense based on the lessons that learned from the previous incidents. So in addition to the previous two, we have two more. So the first two layers of defense against distributed denial service of attacks focus on preparation before the attack and rapid response during the attack. Now, the attack prevention and preemption strengthen the system throughout the resource management, backup resources, secure configuration, and the protocol improvements so that they can continue serving the legitimate users even under the attack. Once an attack begins, the attack detection and filtering identifies a suspicious traffic uh, patterns, and immediately it will filter the malicious packets while allowing the legitimate traffic to continue. Together, all these layers will improve the system resilience and minimize the distribution that is caused by DDoS attacks. Now, the DOS attack prevention. The DOS attack prevention. See, the DOS attack prevention mainly refers to the security measures that implement before or during an attack to reduce the likelihood that attackers can successfully exhaust the system or the network resources. So the objective is what? To stop attack early, to reduce the attack effectiveness, and to keep the service available for genuine users. So in this case, the modern operating systems will enable the SYN cookies by default because they provide an effective defense against TCP SYN flood attack with minimal performance overhead. In parallel, the internet service providers increasingly implement the source address validation, anti-spoofing based on best current practices to reduce the reflection and amplification attacks across the internet. So combining network level filtering with the host level TCP protections that will provide a strong layered defense against many common DOS techniques and all. And then the attack prevention. See, the main idea is to stop or reduce the traffic before it overload the target system while allowing the legitimate user to continue accessing the service. So the attack prevention is the implementation of security mechanisms that will reduce the likelihood and impact of attack before they successfully disrupt the services. So here the effective DOS and DDoS attack prevention requires a layered approach which combine the network level, server level, and application level defenses. So the network controls like rate limiting, packet filtering, and blocking directed broadcast. This will reduce the malicious traffic before it reaches the target. So the server mechanisms like SYN cookies and selective connection management will protect the critical system resources from exhaustion, At the application layer, so the captchas will help to distinguish legitimate users from automated bots, while mirrored and replicated servers will improve the availability and resilience by distributing the workload. So together, these techniques will significantly reduce the effectiveness of denial of service attacks while maintaining the service availability for the genuine users. Then responding to the attacks. See, despite all these defense mechanisms, some attacks may still secure. Therefore, every organization must be prepared to respond quickly and effectively when an attack has been happened. So here, the responding effectively to any of the attacks, either DOS or DDoS, it requires a well-defined incident response plan, clear communication procedure, and the close coordination with the organization's internet service provider. So because large-scale attacks can overwhelm the internet connection before the traffic reaches the target, the upstream traffic filtering by the ISP is often essential. So the organization should also implement anti-spoofing, directed broadcast blocking, and the rate limiting filters while continuously monitoring the network activity using network monitoring tools and intrusion detection systems to rapidly detect the abnormal traffic patterns. So together, these measures will enable the faster detection, the coordinated response, and quicker recovery from the denial of service attacks and all. So then we have the denial of service attacks, I mean the identity type of attack. See, when you think of it like a step-by-step response process followed by the security teams, because the main goal is what, restore the normal service as quickly as possible while minimizing the damage and preventing the future attacks. So the security team do not simply block the traffic, they must identify the attack, stop the attack, find the source, restore the service, and also they have to improve the future defense mechanisms. See, the responding to a DOS attack require a structured and systematic process. The security system must first identify the attack type, capture and analyze the network packets, and design filtering rules to block the malicious traffic, preferably upstream through the internet service provider. If the attack exploits a software vulnerability, the affected system or application must be patched. So the organization should also attempt to trace the attack source, especially when the forensic investigation or legal action is required. To maintain the service availability, they may activate contingency plans, switch to the backup servers. So with all this, we have completed the module 6. So students, you have 6 modules for your midterm exam. By end of today, I mean after 1 hour or half hour, you will receive a detailed announcement about the midterm, and regarding the exam settings and all, the college will inform you all. Okay, so that is what for today's class, and please start studying well for your midterm exam. So your midterm exam will cover from module 1 to module 6. You will be having 50 MCQs. There is no open questions. Okay, so all the best, and see you all in the next class on Sunday. Thank you all.